Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where we talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Elementary. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, I love the intro to this episode being as weird as it is. It's like, oh man, I was like, oh wow, are we really doing this? Or because it's like, oh, it's supposed to be like, oh, Sherlock standing in front of Gregson's grave, and obviously like his casket and stuff like that. I'm like, whoa. I was like, oh, it's just going to be like a kind of a fake out of like, oh, it seems like he's dead when actuality he isn't, or maybe it's going to be something where I thought, okay, so we start off like that and then we rewind to find out. Like I thought there'd be a lot more to it, and then Sherlock's like, just stop, and he's like, what? This is a dream. I'm like, wait, what? And Dower's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I've had this dream multiple times lately. At some point, it's Joan that comes to me. In other cases, it's Marcus. Other times, it's a killer clown. And then Dower, it's like, the fact of the matter is, he's like, oh, where'd the killer clown go back to the circus or something like that? And he's like, you know what? I take back that invitation of me letting you and your partner stay, because obviously you're nuts. The moment that happened, because I was like, wait, this is actually a dream, isn't it? But then it was like the way things are happening. I was like, oh, is this going to be a sick, twisted thing where it's like, oh no, it's actually reality, but Sherlock thinks it's a dream. But I was almost doubting it until Dower turns around and there's the killer clown. I'm like, that's just a crazy intro. I love that. But that's obviously just that. But obviously we're going to dive into the case, which is a very interesting case this week. Obviously, we have a van running into a truck and ends up exploding. It's so sad, too, because that lady who was out with her friends and everything, she died. She was trying to be a good help. She's like, oh, I'm trying to be a good Samaritan. It's like she's a nurse and everything, and she ended up dying because of it. It's like, that sucks. But basically what we end up finding out is that van, the people that were inside were Mirror Trace people. And so it's like, okay, so Sherlock's looking into this. He contacts El Conde, the previous leader and everything. And like the moment we see him not with the tattoos and everything, I'm like, that's so weird, dude. I mean, it's not like it's that weird. I've seen him without the tattoos because like I brought it up before. Like I know him best as, Javi from Castle, so that's what I knew him best as, so it wasn't that big of a stretch. So, but still, it was just kind of interesting. It's like, oh man, and even Sherlock brought it up as like, whoever did the whole tattoo thing, like they did a really good job. It's like, yeah, they did, and I thought that was pretty neat and stuff like that. But nevertheless, it's like apparently like he left that life behind. It's actually kind of sweet in a sense that basically after losing his sister, it changed him to be like, I don't want that anymore. So married his girl, took her and their son, moved to Connecticut. He's up there, teaching soccer to he's like a soccer coach or something. It's like, I mean, second chance and second life for people change all the time, but it's just kind of crazy. But it's this crazy twist of a story, because then it becomes like, okay, so is this about Mary Trace? Because at first it's like, okay, because even Sherlock starts pointing out like, okay, so maybe someone is trying to make Mary Trace look like a, terrorist group. So, like even kind of pointing the finger at some like feds and stuff, being like, oh, maybe you want your respective, federal, group, to get funding, and maybe you can start acting out these, way Sherlock puts it, like draconian means of kind of cracking down to kind of wipe them out once and for all. It's kind of interesting because the lady, the FBI agent Dia, who is that actress, I feel like I've seen her in something fairly recently. Like the thing that always comes to my mind is she was in the TV show Revolution, but I can't remember. I feel like there's something more recent that she popped up in that I recognized her from, but I can't place it. Nevertheless, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, but it turns out there's a lot of other things I just thought was kind of fascinating about the case, because I even love Dower's situation of being like, wait, you up here just accusing a whole bunch of agents, which obviously they didn't appreciate that. Like 99% of them walked out because they were super pissed, like, oh, how dare you question our honor and stuff like that. Dia was the only one who didn't seem to get butthurt about it. Everyone else did. So, but I love, like, Dower's like, I don't know what your deal with Tommy is. He's like, our deal is to catch criminals, even if it means we end up hurting their feelings. Like, who cares? I love that. But I love that, there's the whole thing of trying to track down that hacker overlord who might have something to do with the traffic lights. I love that whole situation of like everyone was like, okay, we'll help you out, but like always, it's like you have a price to pay, which is actually kind of a sad thing when you actually think about it. There's like this being the final season and everything, we won't get any more of those gags. This might legitimately be like the last everyone gag we ever get in the show. It's something crazy to even think about that. But I love it. It's like, oh yeah, getting him to get gelatin to fill up his isolation chamber with, and Joan be like, oh, that's kind of funny. He's like, oh, you think it's funny now? Wait till you have to go use the bathroom, because it wasn't just my chamber I could fill up with gelatin. You see her kind of look like, oh, come on. But that led to, it's like, oh yeah, the NSA had picked up Overlord. It's like, but we just call him Phil. I love it too, because it's like how Phil got caught by everyone is because they couldn't track him down, find out who he really was. But apparently he was on, like gotten some heated arguments with someone else. I forgot the username, but it ended up being kind of a lover's quarrel. But then they ended up finding out who he was because they found out who this person was. Because it also turns out that this person is the same person that turned Phil into the NSA. And he's like, wait, what? He turns into the NSA agent, dude. He's like, you didn't tell me that part of it, which is like, oh, that's got to suck. You were ratted out by someone you care about like that. That's really interesting, So, but that in itself then kind of shifts everything, because it's like, okay, so this isn't even about the van. The van was just kind of coincidental and accident. It's also interesting too to learn that like basically it was kind of like them not siphoning gas. What was the term they actually used? Basically, they were filling up gas. They were filling out gas chamber things and just selling the gas, kind of trying to, make a profit like that. And I was like, I didn't know that was a scam. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but I never heard of that before now. But nevertheless, it's not about their van. It's not about Mary Trace. It had nothing to really do with them. They just ended up being, in the grand scheme, they ended up being a part of this. It was actually about the original truck driver, about specifically what he's carrying. This has to deal with like construction companies and like, competitives. Like they were trying to stop that truck so that someone else, because basically it was building elevators so they can mess up on this job and lose some other thing that they were kind of bidding into. So it was a whole complicated thing. Like what this basically turned into a little bit of corporate espionage to a certain extent, I guess you can kind of label it. It turns out the dude Saul that Bell had met with early in the episode, I was thinking the twist was going to be that he was Overlord. Turns out not to be the case. Sad thing is the poor bastard later on gets killed by Mary Trace. I was like, oh, they must have found out that he was the one behind all this. But then it did hit me later on. It's like, how did they find out? But it's like, it's the whole part of the plan. Kill Sal so you can cover up any trace of, what they were up to and everything. So I was like, oh. The real sad, twisted part of it is it's like, oh yeah, his father-in-law set the whole situation. I'm like, Jesus, like that sucks. You literally kill your daughter's husband like that. Like for him, it's kind of like, he was always nice to Julie, so that's all he cared about. But still, it's kind of like, that's super messed up. I get covering your tracks and everything, but damn, dude, that's super cold-hearted. But that, like I said, it was just over corporate stuff like that, competition, they didn't know, obviously, that, because apparently the lights were shifting multiple times, so they were trying to stop the driver at multiple points, but it didn't go down until the Mary Trace van just happened to hit them. It was going to happen eventually, getting hit, but obviously he ended up hitting a Mary Trace van, and that exploded because of the gas and everything. It was just a whole bunch of stuff, so that was, like I said, just overall a very interesting case in that regard. But other than that, some other big things that ended up going down in this episode is like, hey, Gregson's up and he's awake. I am curious what he talked to Joan about, because we get the conversation he has with Sherlock. He's like, before everything went down, I was going to call. He's like, no, let's leave the past in the past and let's just move forward. It's like, he's like, oh, because, he was like, I was surprised, Paige told me you were here. I thought you were just going to pull the plug and everything. And he's like, no, like, coming to see you, it's the right thing to do, like I wanted to do. That's, so it's good to see that him and Sherlock are good again. And Sherlock had already made his peace beforehand. Like, no matter what happens, like, Gregson is still important to him, like, no matter how much bad blood he had. So it's good to see that they got over. I mean, to be fair, they've been in this situation before. Maybe not necessarily to this extent, but they've had bad blood on multiple occasions throughout the past just because of stuff that Sherlock did on his own. The whole M situation is, like, one of the earliest examples I can think of. Obviously, hiding his, like, concussion condition, like obviously that was kind of a big no too, but Sherlock's crossed the line before, so it's not like this was like the first time. So this was more so on Gregson's part, but still, so that's what makes this situation different, because usually it's like, oh, Sherlock's in the wrong. It's like in this situation, Gregson was super in the wrong, but once again, it's a whole understandable situation. So, But it brings up some very fascinating stuff because it turns out that Patrick lied a lot about a lot of the stuff that he brought up. For one, it's like Gregson is like, yeah, that picture he talked about how I, figured everything out. It's like, yeah, it might have been in his office, but that's not where I saw it. I saw it online. Like me showing up to talk to him and me going to the baseball field wasn't the same day. That was literally like 24 hours apart. And it's like, so why would you lie about that? Because then it turns out looking at cell phone data, it's like, oh, you were home until like 10 minutes before you shot Gregson. So it's like someone contacted you. So it's like you might have had someone else was watching Gregson and contacted you. It's like, wait, what? And even Joan goes to visit him, and it's so interesting. He's like, Jade? No, Joan. He's like, I'm always very good with names. I'm like, that, to me, that was kind of like that's kind of a bad sign if you remember your name. I don't think that's good. But, I love the fact that Joan kept pushing him and pressing him, and he's like, because she's like, the fact of the matter is, you knew about Tim's plan and everything, like, you purposely killed him and stuff like that, you're trying to make it seem like it was a coincidence. It's like, no, and she keeps referring to him as a terrorist, but he's like, I'm not a terrorist, and he got upset about it. I'm like, okay, but then, like, something Gregson says later on of, like, a lot of terrorists don't think they're terrorists, everyone's the hero of their own story, but then I'm like, is it really just that, or is there more to it? Because even Joan is like, Patrick, and she's like, I'm kind of believing him when he says that he doesn't think he's like, I'm not a terrorist. She goes to his wife is kind of backing up everything of like, oh, he's not a terrorist. The game that he plays, that's how he's communicating whoever he's connected to. So it's like, what the hell is going on there, There is definitely some like conspiracy plot going on here, but it's just like we still can't quite piece it together like what this is and for what purpose. Like I said, to the point to be like, I'm not a terrorist and stuff like that, to be mixed up in like that, it might be a situation where Patrick is mixed up in something he can't get out of, I mean, whatever it is, even his wife's a little freaked out by, like, she's okay with it, but for her, it's like, they wouldn't hurt our children with it, and it's like, you just got to be strong and everything. I'm like, I don't know, for even the wife to be down for it, it seems like there's something more to this. Either they're getting paid to do this, or maybe they think they're a part of something greater. Maybe it is kind of playing into the whole, they don't think they're bad guys because they're like, oh no, we're doing this for good. Maybe there's some like governmental like conspiracy going on in the U.S. of like, oh, they're thinking like, oh, we're doing this for the U.S., we're patriots, we're doing the right thing. So even if we had to go to jail, it's for the greater good type of situation. I don't know. But what's interesting though is it seems like he hands his wife a piece of paper saying, basically saying, tell them Joan trouble. So it's like, basically it looks like his wife is going to be helping facilitate a hit against Joan. So that's interesting considering everything that just happened with Gregson, and now there's a hit on her. There's a hit on Joan, which to be fair would not be the first time. Let's not forget that. Which is kind of crazy to think about, but it's like, yeah, I mean, their work has always been dangerous, but now it's like, okay. I don't know, like I said, don't know what to really think of this situation. We still are missing a lot of pieces here, but there is definitely something grander going on. The communication through the video game, that person that, Joan was trying to contact, it's like, oh, they like erase any trace of themselves from the game, so there's no tracking their username and stuff like that. The fact is, even the wife making a mistake like that, I told her it was okay for her to check the game. I'm sorry. He's like, it's okay. So it's like, they're amateurs at this, whatever this is. And like, it seems like he might be more into kind of like, oh, handle things on my front type of thing. So it's like, I was actually kind of surprised to find out his wife has any involvement, whatever this is. I thought it was more so kind of his own thing. I feel like that's typically how these things might go, but I guess it makes sense for more than just one person to be involved with all of this, just in case one thing kind of falls up. Like, even if he ends up in jail, like, he's seen a lot of this coming, so it's like, if I end up in jail, I think it's okay, because that way his wife can carry out maybe what he needs to, or maybe he's played his part already. Everything else is already in motion, so if all I have to do is just, play my part and be the distraction, the fall guy with all this. I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Gregson going through his recovery and everything, what that's going to look like. I'm also curious to see if that Hannah situation will circle back around. Everything's good now, but there's still the whole aspect of like, yeah, you murdered someone. Yes, he was a piece of shit. He was a serial killer and everything. And even Sherlock said it. Like, if circumstances were different, like if you had just come to me first, I would have helped you cover up the whole Hannah situation. So it's like, will that play any role in this? Like, what's everything going to be like going forward. I'm so fascinated to see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.